Hello, welcome. Dr. Sushma Singh this side. Today in Unit 15, the middle class, we are continuing our lecture with topic Evolution of the Middle Class in India. V.B. Mishra in his seminal work on the middle classes in India had concluded that institutions conducive to capitalist growth were not lacking in India prior to the British rule. Pre-British India did witness an Indian artisan industry as well as the occupational specialization and additionally a separate class of merchants. The guild power remained purely money power, unsupported by any authority of a political or military nature. The British rule resulted in the emergence of a class of intermediaries serving as a link between the people and the new rulers. In Mishra's viewpoint, there was a fundamental revolution in social relations and class structure in India. The emergent class of the intermediaries was the middle class that continued to grow in strength and prosperity with the progress of foreign rule. Significantly, the establishment of trading relations followed by the rule of the British East India Company set the stage in the creation of this class. Furthermore, as part of their educational policy, the British attempted to create a class comparable to their own to assist the former in the administration of the country. The aim of the British was to create a class of imitators, not originators, of new values and methods. As Pawan K. Verma points out in his work on the middle class from the circumstances of their origin and growth, the members of the educated class such as government servants, lawyers, college teachers and doctors constituted the bulk of Indian middle class. This middle class in Verma's opinion was largely dominated by the traditional higher castes. Ahmad and Refield argue that in its formation and the role played in the history, the Indian middle class bore close resemblance, at least in some parts, to its European counterparts. Like their counterparts in Europe, earlier some of the entered to the commercial activity either as agent or independently in the 17th and the first half of the 18th century, amassed great wealth and acquired social status far beyond what they could aspire to have in the structure of economic relations in the traditional society. But alongside differences existed too. While the European middle class was independent, the Indian middle class was under foreign rule. Initially, the middle class helped in the establishment of the British power and promotion of European commerce and enterprise in India. It was only after the mutiny that it began to assume the political role of the competitor for power with the British. With the passage of time, the competitor role adopted by an important section of the middle class came to dominate over that of a collaborate, and this continued till the very end of the Raj. Ahmad and Refield conclude that from the beginning of the 20th century, the Indian middle class had come to pose a serious challenge to the continuance of the British power. It was instrumental in arousing national consciousness and giving a sense of unity as a nation to the public. Sanjay Joshi, in his study of the making of middle class in colonial India, attempted to explain why traditional sociological indicators of income and occupation cannot take us very far in understanding the category of middle class. Though the economic background of the middle class was important, the power and constitution of the middle class in India was based not on the economic power it yielded, which was minimal, but on the ability of its members to be cultural entrepreneurs. Being middle class was primarily a project of self-fashioning. Joshi articulated that the definition and power of the middle class from its propagation of modern ways of life. Heterogeneity was an attribute to the middle class. The rapid expansion of a new middle class in India during the last decades of the 20th century and its increasing influence in many parts of the public sphere constitute one of the most important changes in India's contemporary history. Andre Batley writes that the middle class is not only very large but also highly differentiated internally, to such an extent that it may be more appropriate to speak of middle classes than the middle class in India. Stresses upon the heterogeneous nature of its social composition. The recent shifts in economic policy in favor of privatization, liberalization, and globalization have generated a wide interest in the middle class, its size, composition, and its values. Andre Batley views middle class in India as a part of a relatively new social formation based on religion, caste, and kinship. In Batley's opinion, middle class values in India are difficult to characterize because they are still in the process of formation and have still not acquired a stable form. As such, they are marked by deep and pervasive anti-malaise, meaning contradiction, opposition, and tensions inherent in a set of norms and values. Public discussion of middle class in the last 10 years has been driven largely by media. There is hardly anything substantial in the structure of the middle class in the sociological literature. The discussion of the middle class values is constrained by the absence of reliable and systematic data on the size and composition of the class. Estimates of its size vary from under 100 million to over 250 million persons. There is no single criteria for defining the middle class. Occupational functions and employment status are the two most significant criteria, although education and income are also widely used. The new middle class, according to Batley, is not only defined by occupation but also by education. In India, the origins of the middle class derive not so much from an industrial revolution or a democratic revolution as from colonial rule. In the last 50 years, the middle class has grown steadily. Connecting on the growing middle class, Gurcharan Das stated that although the middle class is composed of many occupations, commerce has always been at the center. As the business mediated between the landed upper class and the laboring lower classes, the 20th century witnessed the entrepreneurial surge in the last decade after 1991 and expansion of the middle class in the last 2 decades after 1980s. After growing at the rate of 3.5% a year from 1950 to 1980, India's economic growth rate increased to 5.6% in the decade of 80s. It climbed further to 6.3% in the decade of 90s. In these 2 decades, the middle class more than tripled. Between 1998 to 2000, $2.5 billion in venture capital funds have come to India. Writing about this middle class, Das argued that as a result of changing trend, a new kind of entrepreneur has emerged in India. As Gurucharan Das noted, although the reforms after 1991 have been slow, hesitant and incomplete, yet they have set in motion a process of profound change in Indian society. It is Joseph Scrumpter who coined the term entrepreneur. Contrary to earlier times, the new millionaire today are looked up to with pride and even reverence. For they are a new meritocracy, highly educated entrepreneur professionals who are creating value for innovating in the global knowledge economy. The emergence of a sizable middle class in the last decades is widely regarded with hope by modernizers and fear by the traditionalists as the single most important development in the ongoing transformation of the Indian society. According to survey by NCAER, the middle class grew from 8% of the population in 1986 to 18% in 2000, which is about 185 million. It appears that for many modern sociologists of India, the emergent middle class is a harbinger of modernity, but the question of greater relevance is how does one define modernity? Can one define the middle class as modern based on material progress, or is the middle class ethos to be analyzed in a more deep-rooted manner with regard to the basis of formation of social relations among people who constitute the middle class? In the subsequent section, the focus will be on understanding the rising middle class in contemporary India and whether we can define it as modern, traditional, as battlely it is transitional. Here we want to close this lecture. Thanks for listening.